Wama Guru Benda Hadaraga Manjere Wagenda Tara Samana Shireba Sawazade
The Dharma is bringing compassion and shunyata. To one's heart, ultimately to bring compassion and shunyata into the indestructible drop. Right? So this is the point. This is the tantric method. The main goal is, of course, same as in Paramitayana, benefiting others. Benefiting others. We don't make any changes there. Enlightenment, the state of enlightenment, the state of Vajradhara, is simply a means of accomplishing that. Accomplishing just that. Bringing all others to a state of peace, sharing this peace, offering one's service to all others. This is the point of our practice. This is the main goal of our practice. And Buddhahood, the state of the enlightened mind, the state of Vajradhara, is just a means, nothing more than a means of benefiting all others. So this enlightening process, all forms of Dharma practice is an enlightening process, right? In all different traditions, the practices that are taught in different traditions, they are all part of that enlightening process equally. Equally. in this path, taking the three basic kaya into the path, into the result, this is a very powerful, effective way of purifying these three status, these three states into the enlightened state. In the Anuttara Yoga Tantra, one of the unique features is bringing the physical reality and the mental reality to a point, right? I think this is a very important part of this path. Form and mind. Form and mind. Object and subject. Object and subject. To really bring this non-dualistic realization to a fully enlightened state, then one cannot do that without bringing form and mind into a non-dualistic state. Without bringing mind and body to a single point, to a point of convergence, then it is not possible to bring the realization of shunyata into the fully enlightened state. Body and mind. Our body, our minds. In their current forms, in their current state, they cannot act as a base for fully enlightened state. In their current state, it is not possible to become Buddha, to attain the state of Buddha, right? So then to get our bodies to its very core and our minds to its very bare nature, get it down to that level, and then use that to turn those two into the method and the wisdom, right? This is, as you all know, what is something like a unique feature of the Anuttara Yoga Tantric practice, right? So, in the end, our body and mind, in their most basic form, transforms into the path. In other non-Anuttara Yoga Tantric practice, even though there are many practices which really help in overcoming much of the afflictions, obscurations at the course level, but without overcoming, without utilizing the body, mind to its fullest power, potential, then something is lacking, right? Something is not complete. It is like, yes, we have used many resources, but we haven't used our resources completely, right? So with Anuttara Yoga Tantric practice, then with this practice, then we use the body, mind at all levels, at all levels. At all levels. How can the two kayas or the four kayas, which are inseparable, be accomplished by a path that does not bring the method and wisdom together to a point? It is not logical. If the method and the wisdom are separate, by working like this, how can we develop two kayas that are of the same nature, that are inseparable, right? So also thinking like this, then it makes somehow the Anuttara Yoga Tantric practice, it makes sense in that way. Looking at it like that, it makes some sense. So, as we were talking before, it could be that this fast path, really what it means is that it is like a last little after all those eons of engaging in the Paramadayanas and then coming to the 10th stage, right? In contrast, then the Tantrayana, it's like just a few moments, if you contrast that to the, is it 3 countless eons, right? And what does countless mean here in this context? Isn't it something like 1 followed by 59 zeros? I think something like that, right? 1 followed by 59 zeros. That's a countless. And then 3 times that. And not years, but aeons. So and even after all those 3 countless eons, one still doesn't become a Buddha. Only the 10th stage. Only the 10th stage, right? This is, of course, from the tantric viewpoint, of course, obviously, clearly. Using all resources in however form of state they may exist, coarse, subtle, subtlest. Yeah. That requires much effort, much determination, much compassion, without compassion. Yes, one can still have something like tantric powers and what is considered like the common accomplishments. Yes, one can accomplish those. As we talked before, like even Vajra repetition and many other things, including something like the generation stage and also many aspects of the completion stage, even without unconditional compassion practice, even without bodhicitta. These are also possible, right? Once we had a small discussion, so I think it is possible. I think even without bodhicitta, like the winds entering the central channel and Vajra repetition and Tummo practice, very high level, up to a certain point, I think it's possible. As long as there is determination, etc., like that, right? But without combining the two bodhicittas into the path, right? Then there's no possibility of fully enlightened state, right? Because something is missing. The most important factor, compassion, is missing, right? Without compassion, then our tantric practice becomes something like mundane, right? Not special, or maybe special is not the right word, not so beneficial, yeah? Then it's only for accomplishing some things, right? But there isn't that openness, there isn't that all-accomplishing factor. How can one be fully enlightened without having the 5 jhanas, right? And for the 5 jhanas, one of them, the wisdom, primordial wisdom of all accomplishment, etc. And how can one achieve that without unconditional compassion for all, right? So, bringing bodhicitta, and then right now, the bodhicitta we develop is, of course, we're using only the coarse mental factors, right? And I'm not sure, even like during the clear light state, whether we would even have like separate mental factors, you know? I'm not sure. We would use the words like primordial wisdom, but then that is the clear light realizing emptiness, right? That is primordial wisdom. There isn't like a separate primordial wisdom, right? So maybe this is why with the coarse minds, we have all these mental factors because of that coarseness, because of that separation. Whereas with the very subtle mind, with our innate mind, I think that's a better word, with our innate mind, we don't need those factors, right? Because its nature is that it is all accomplishing. It has that potential. It is in a way all knowing, right? In a way. I have to use this carefully, right? Somehow, I think I like to believe that the innate mind has different qualities than the minds that I know right now, than the minds that I'm experiencing right now, right? I think the innate mind is so much more potent, yeah? Innate mind. So like that. Okay, so that is, I think, enough for today. And this afternoon, during our question session and with our interaction, I think I stopped talking around 3, and then it felt like a few minutes, and it was like almost like 10 past 4. I didn't realize that, and there seems to be even, I think, more questions. So maybe we could have, and if you would like to share, then, Carlos. Yeah.
If you could speak more about the innate mind, please.
Innate mind. First of all, I want to say this before I start saying some other words. I think it is okay to say it like this. Innate mind is one mind we have never experienced in our lives. Right? Innate mind is the mind we have never experienced in our lives. Experienced. And when I say we, of course, people like myself who have not reached a certain state on the Anuttara Yoga Tantra path. So innate mind is the mind we have never experienced and that we will experience at the final moment. You know, that's guaranteed, right? Because life, it begins with the intermediate state. And then the birth state. And then the state so then the state that is before, it's just called before, and then the death state. So we have 4 states, and it begins normally with the intermediate state, right? And then after the intermediate state, then birth, right? So that's the rebirth state, and then what we call something like just like the preceding state, something like that, and then death state, right? So we, meaning we, that state begins with intermediate state and then so on. And right now, most of us, I think we are in the preceding state, right? And then the final moment when we go through the dying process and then culminating in the death clear light, right? That is the death state. So that's when we experience innate mind. So since I've never experienced innate mind, how can I talk about it? I can give you like some of the did you know facts. I could share a few, but then I don't know. They have their limitations, those facts, right? But the point is, even though I am not experiencing the innate mind, it's there. It is there. As of right now, it is there, right? But it is not manifest, right? Because of all these coarse minds. They are manifest, right? They are manifest. Innate mind in terms of continuum, it seems that the innate mind has its own continuum, and then the three appearances have their own continuum, and then the five sense consciousnesses have their own continuum, and then the sixth consciousness also has different consciousnesses within it where they have individual continuums, right? And how these continuums, how they work and how they affect each other, even though they are of separate continuums, they are all still, nevertheless, they can affect each other. It is not simply like, if I'm thinking like this, that may not necessarily affect other person's thinking, because we have separate minds, we have individual continuum, right? But that is not the case for our different states of minds, even though they have separate continuums, because at the end, when they all dissolve into their nature, they all dissolve into one innate mind, right? And because of that, then it is possible how, even though they have separate continuums, they still affect each other. There is that connection, right? They are connected by the innate mind, which is the support of all other minds. So the innate mind is like the basic mind, and it is what holds everything together. And also karma, it also works because of the innate mind. when the innate mind does not realize emptiness, this is then the base of samsara. And when the innate mind realizes emptiness, then it is the base of nirvana. It is the base of the state of Buddha, right? So this is how, these are like some words, thoughts on innate mind. And even though many of our course minds, they are very closely related with something like the neurons, the synapse, etc., like that, the innate mind, I have some doubts. I think the innate mind, if there is some synapse or if there is something, then it has to be what we can see through monitors and through those sensors. It cannot be, that cannot be it, right? This so-called subtle wind, this energy, right? I think it's in a different dimension, undetectable by sensors, etc. And the innate mind also is not affected by physical things. Our other mental states, yes, they are connected with the forms, they are connected with our senses, they are connected with our brains, they are connected with the neurons, something like that, etc. Because the channels, they are not something that we can see. It is not like we can look inside and then see, this is the central channel here. And then this is, those two other channels. It is not. It is not. These subtle, they're like forms, but they can disappear when the karma ceases. When the karma isn't there anymore, then they leave no trace, right? It is not something like solid or a subtle wind. It's considered a form, a physical form, but I don't think it is made up of molecules, right? I don't think so. Or if it is, then we have to redefine molecules, right? We have to reimagine molecules. So the subtle mind, innate mind, even though it acts as the basis of all, yet it does so little. It does so little. It is never involved directly. But somehow it takes it all in, right? It takes everything. Everything the other mental states are accomplishing all the other mental states are seeing everything. The innate mind is taking it all in, right? It is absorbing everything. But it is not, it doesn't make a big scene, you know? So almost like lifeless, as long as there's life. And then in the final moment, then it just briefly manifests. And I think, Yarpel, I think you have something to share. The mic, please.
I'm not sure, Rinpoche. I think to remember that the innate mind is also empty of true existence. It's impermanent. Is it not?
Isn't innate mind empty?
Of inherent existence?
I think so.
No.
Yes.
Because when we talk, it sort of sounds like what the Chitamanas call their storehouse mind.
I think it is also called that in Anuttara Yoga Tantra, is it not? Same words, different meaning. I think sometimes language is a funny thing. Same words, same labels, but to be understood differently, right? The basis for all, alaya. I think in the Anuttara Yoga Tantra, I think the innate mind is also alaya. It is the basis for all. You're right. The Chitta Madrins also one part of consciousness, the one that stores everything, the one that goes from life, from lifetime to lifetime. That is also called alaya. You're right. But how Chitta Madrins understand alaya and how Anuttara Yoga Tantra, I think even those one word, but in terms of meaning, I think different. Alaya, basis for all. What is all? All is included within samsara and nirvana. Innate mind is the basis for both these two states, right? Sometimes alaya, basis for all, can be referred to emptiness as well. But innate mind it's also referred to innate mind too. And in the context of Anuttara Yoga Tantra, I think the innate mind, seeing that as the basis for all, and not interpreting that as per Chitta Madrin's way of thinking, not interpreting like they would, but seeing it in a different way, it helps to I think, bring innate mind into the practice. So something like that. Oh, was there one more thing you would like to add?
About that subject or a different subject?
Any.
Well, we've had this conversation several times, I think. I think it's a necessity of understanding the suffering of samsara that gives us the energy to put into practice to pursue these higher practices. Because without that, it's hard to think that some samsaric activity is not more important than just going to our cushion and trying to pursue something without that energy of how desperate our situation really is.
Yes. Yes. I agree. Yes. And compassion is exactly, I think, what you just mentioned. Suffering. One word, but different meanings. One word, different meanings. So, suffering without opening the knowledge of suffering, simply having like a theory of some suffering is very limiting. Then one is not able to really experience unconditional compassion without knowing suffering, what it is, right? So, knowing suffering is also very helpful. A more understanding suffering in broader terms. In broader terms, knowing it in a comprehensive way really helps us deal with many of our daily issues, right? If we know suffering, then that's like we are already halfway there, right? To know suffering. And knowing suffering is, of course, not easy. Developing some theory of that is easy, but knowing suffering, that takes much practice, much training, much contemplating, right? And much internalizing, much internalizing. To feel suffering, yes, we have all felt suffering, but have we really felt like have we ever felt how it feels to feel suffering in a holistic way? No? Right? In a holistic way. By really understanding the suffering nature, have we then felt suffering? Right? Of course, we have all felt a type of suffering, a moment of suffering, but to really feel suffering, I think it takes more effort. It takes more effort. Even, let us not talk about great compassion, but really feeling true suffering, right? Feeling true suffering. That's why we have all those pages just dedicated on suffering, right? I mean, if we have all felt suffering, why study, right? Why study? We know it, we have felt it, we have experienced it. So why do we need so many folios, treatises on suffering, right? So
because maybe we think that it applies to someone else.
that is a big part of it, of course. And also just true suffering. Yeah, just true suffering. Have I felt that the state that I am in is that I can feel that I am in the state of being influenced by karma and klesha. Feeling that, knowing that, that takes some effort, right? Much thinking, going beyond our perception, going beyond what we call people suffering around the world, going beyond the suffering we see on TV, going beyond how we say, I am suffering, right? Like that underlying suffering, the underlying suffering, you know, all pervasive suffering. Yeah. So this, to feel that, to even feel that for a moment, I think it's in a way like having a glimpse of emptiness, you know, to even momentarily experience all pervasive suffering. Yes, you're absolutely right. Oh, Carlos, yes, there, yeah.
If you could speak a little bit on the phenomena of the nature of space.
By that, of course, you mean emptiness, right?
I was thinking everything goes into space and space doesn't exist.
Because of space, everything exists. Space gives rise to everything, and everything dissolves into space. In the non-conceptual realization of space, space is neither existing nor non-existing, neither both and none not, something like that, free of all extremes, right? I think this is something like what the Paramita Sutra states. Free of all extremes. Free of all extremes. This thinking, is it this or is it that? Is very dualistic, right? Is it this or is it that? This is a very dualistic way of thinking. Of course, that is our main mode of analyzing right now. The point is, in the fully enlightened state, we develop a different mode of seeing, right? In the fully enlightened state, we do not think in this mode. Is it this or is it that? Right? In the fully enlightened state, there is no what we call motivation. There is no motivation. There is no thinking, or I think I have to say it like this. There is no such thoughts in the fully enlightened state. Why? Because the fully enlightened state accords with reality. And reality is more. The reality is beyond this or that, right? Being free of this, of all extremes, that is space, that is emptiness. right? That is emptiness. Freedom from all extremes. As an object, that is object emptiness, and as subjective experience being free of all extremes, that is the subjective emptiness. Clear light. Clear light. However, in our current state, then for now, or something like for the sake of conventionality, for the sake of conventionality, right? We say this is this or this is that, because obviously we have to function, right? So of course we would say space exists. But you're right, it doesn't exist inherently, right? It is empty of inherent existence. That space is simply an object. And for an object, that is, for an object, for it to be an object, it is reliant on a subject, subjective experience. So therefore, pratitya samutpada, right? Dependent arising. The two truths Buddha taught for us. For the Buddhas, Buddha never taught anything, right? But for our benefit, then the two truth makes sense, right? We begin with that. And then we say they're of one entity, of one nature, even though it may seem like a contradiction by saying there are two truths, but then they're saying, oh, but they're of one entity, right? But the point being that gradually we have to, as we develop our minds, then this gap, this two-part, gradually it becomes non-dualistic, right? All of our seeings in twos, right? Gradually, we go beyond that mode of seeing. Okay. Yeah. It seems like the more something is addressed, more hands. Please.
Thank you, Rinpoche. My question is, what is the impure and pure illusory body, and what relation does it have to clear light?
The impure illusory body is illusory body that is obtained after something like the ultimate isolation of mind practice, what we call example clear light. As soon as the practitioner comes out of that state, then illusory body is generated, right? So this is, I think, impure illusory body. So it is generated at the reverse near attainment state, right? Simultaneously. And then the whole reverse process, and then going back again in the same order, and this time then culminating in actual clear light, which serves as like the antidote to the klesha. And this is the klesha that is explained only like in the Anuttara Yoga tantric, right, system. And then when one coming out of again the clear light, actual clear light state, then in the reverse order, the near attainment state, then one generates pure illusory body. Tijua? Nos. Pajin Rinpoche bi tungi yezile, ani lodogi nyertop, lodogi nyertop, ani tobada tunyamdo, ani tabi chulu. Yes, I think it is like this. Yes, this is how it is explained. Yes. But somehow it makes sense. It makes sense, like with the winds and the minds and the subtleties, of going back and entering clear light and then coming out of that, right? There is like a certain logic within, there's like a certain science within the Anuttara Yoga. Is it physiological? How do you combine both? Psychophysical. Okay, thank you. Psychophysical. Yes. Okay.
The first question is, why are the white and red drops called bodhicittas? And are there any connections with the bodhicittas in Sutrayana?
Bodhicitta in the Sutrayana, conventional and ultimate bodhicitta, right? We have that. So the wishing, the method part is called conventional bodhicitta, and then the wisdom is called ultimate bodhicitta. So something similarly in the with the two drops, the white drop, like the method, and then the red drop, the wisdom. So therefore, I think bodhicitta. And one other reasoning maybe is without these two drops coming together, and with that, then a mind that is connected to the two drops becoming inseparable. Without that, then in a way it is not possible to attain enlightenment, right? So because of that, then those naturally, then they are called bodhicittas, even though they are not mental consciousness per se, right? But because the two drops mixing and becoming inseparable, and then they acting as something like the basis. With that, those coming two together, it's, how does that come about? That comes by the winds, and then the winds act as mounts to the subtle mind, which is the actual method, the actual main cause, the main cause of this, like the final enlightening process, right? It is the final process of that enlightening part. It is the final part of that enlightening process, right? So therefore, this is called bodhicitta. But usually I think bodhicitta is also something like, it is like something like a secret language. So it's not so revealing, not saying it so clearly out in the open, but it is something like a, what is that called? Secret code. Oh, Mingin Namdang Sejoro. Mingin Namdang. It is synonymous. It is used like a synonym. It is used as a synonym to refer to the two drops in this context. So it is a synonym of the drops, bodhicitta. So bodhicitta is also a synonym for the drops, right? So during empowerments, to not sort of see it very clearly, then something like bodhicitta, and then depending on that context, of course, it's very clear. Yes.
Can Rinpoche talk about how the Dzogchen method generates or makes manifest the innate mind?
Now, with all due respect, I don't know much about Dzogchen, but my feeling is that this is a great practice of really using the innate mind, to see itself, right? To see itself. To see itself. To look at itself. The innate mind looking at itself. This is a great method. Yes.
I'm going to go back to suffering. My question is much simpler. Rinpoche, why is it that we sort of don't want to look at suffering? It seems like we're purposely avoid to facing the suffering. Is it because it's horrible to really get present to it? Or is it because we're so distracted? Or is it because we don't want to face that we're causing it? It's much easier to blame the world and blame everything else. What are your thoughts on that? Why is it so hard to face it?
I think one reason why we don't want to look at suffering is that we want to be free of suffering, right? And we think that somehow by looking at suffering or seeing suffering, we are thinking that would make us suffer more, and turning a blind eye onto it would alleviate suffering. right? So this is because we are now looking at suffering purely on the feeling sensation level. If we are able to associate this word suffering in a different context, then I think it makes it easier to face suffering, right? Even the suffering at the feeling level, if we can associate suffering as a state, as an underlying state, rather than the feeling themselves, then I think it makes it easier to deal with suffering and to accept suffering, right? So it has to do, I think, with something like misconceptualizing suffering, right? I think there really is that risk that we might do that. We might have a misconception of what suffering is. We might misidentify suffering. Like if suffering was to be a person, then we really don't. We have really we're thinking just this person's hand is this person or something like that, and not really able to see the whole, see it in a holistic way. Yeah. Yes.
It's on the same subject. Rinpoche, it seems like when we do look at suffering, it's easy for us to blame others. And there's, I think, an inherent human maybe condition or how we're raised that it's not us that's creating it, it's someone else and it's coming at us. And it just seems like the more we study, or I study Buddhism, the more you peel the onion to go, oh, wait a minute, it's me and only me that's causing it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. It's really interesting how we I think it really comes down to the source of our sufferings. The source of our sufferings. And immediately we say, the source of suffering is not in me. The source of suffering is out there. It's with that person or with the weather or with whatever, It's out there, right? And maybe this has to do with our 5 senses, because we are so much into the 5 senses. Even though we do have the 6th sense and we do have conceptual thoughts, but they are very much connected with the 5 senses. And the 5 senses, they are really the dominant ones. They really dominate our world, so to speak, right? So I think if we, instead of just like following our senses and really kind of outsourcing like our functions or our seeings, our views, outsourcing almost entirely to our 5 senses, if we sort of do not regulate giving this responsibility to our 5 senses, then yes, we will continue thinking like this. So then to look inwards, to look at myself, to look at my thoughts, time to reflect, self-reflection, something like that. Mind reflection, right? To reflect on my mind, to take some time to reflect on oneself. I think it's very helpful in changing this pattern, right? This pattern, right? And yes, sometimes, yes, it is true that someone else's actions are connected to our suffering. Of course, we cannot deny that. But many times, yes, many times I think I go overboard on this kind of blaming others, like outsourcing. Like that, yeah.
Is it the case that the meaning of emptiness is slightly different between sutra and tantra?
No.
In the sense that well, let me try. In sutra, we're taught the definition of emptiness is the mere absence of intrinsic existence, which is a non-affirming negative. So it's very odd to call emptiness an object because it's a non-affirming negative. What object is there?
It is an object, though. Even on the Paramatayana level, emptiness is nonetheless an object.
But it's not a thing.
Defined thing. Is it if it is a thing, does it have to be impermanent? Yes or no? Very simple.
I was thinking yes.
Okay, then you're right. It is not a thing. But if it is an object, does it have to be a thing?
So you're saying object is an object of perceptions. Well, alternatively, in Tantra, you've just said that there's a certain level of clear light mind,
Yes.
which you're equating as emptiness. Now
Subject
that sounds like a
emptiness.
positive phenomenon, which perhaps is characterized by moment to moment arising and passing away, which is not a mere absence. It's a positive affirmation of some type of phenomenon.
Well, in emptiness and also clear light, they are both equal in the fact that even though they are empty in their own ways, there still is something left out of that emptying. As a result of emptying, something is still here, right?
Isn't that heresy? I mean, I thought emptiness is the mere absence of intrinsic existence, and there's nothing to be affirmed. Isn't that the prasangika viewpoint?
How is that?
The mere absence implies that there's no positive phenomenon that you're asserting exists. It's simply saying that that you're not asserting anything being there. It's a non-affirming negative.
How about interdependence? Where do you put that?
Isn't that a concept imputed on?
Well, isn't emptiness a concept?
Yes, okay.
So,
not any positive phenomena, but can still affirm the emptiness. So here, my thinking is that the mere absence of inherent existence, even though it is a non-affirming negative phenomena, but that doesn't mean that it does not affirm anything after negating inherent existence. It does affirm mere absence. or it does affirm emptiness. But emptiness is not a positive phenomenon. So if anything that after negating something affirm positive phenomena, then it cannot be classified as non-affirming negative phenomena. But emptiness, it does affirm something, but that is not positive phenomena. So if it affirm positive phenomena, then of course you're right. It cannot be like non-affirming negative phenomena.
Now I'm lost. Can you please give the mic to Jim once more? I feel, Jim, you are asking me a very important question, but I think it's really my English, and also maybe not also, it's a combination of my level of English and also not really knowing where you're asking the question from. So maybe if you could maybe word it in a different way, this might be helpful for me.
Okay, so I'm coming from ignorance about what clear light is.
Okay.
Because it sounds like clear light is a type of consciousness. It's not just emptiness. It's an
absolutely.
It's
right.
awareness of emptiness. So
it
how
is.
can and mind must have moment to moment arising and passing away, mustn't it? Which makes it a type of phenomenon, which makes it actually a conventionality, doesn't it? So how could it be called an emptiness?
Oh, I see. Right. Yes. So we have to make it very clear. Clear light, the innate mind, primordial mind, okay? All different labels, but same meaning. Is it empty? Yes, it is empty. But is it emptiness?
Right.
Not emptiness.
But I thought you answered maybe Lozong's question. Is it emptiness?
No.
I think you said yes to him. Is the clear light emptiness? Didn't you, Lozong?
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm talking about you.
Emptiness. Again, like because I think we have to be very clear on how we use the term emptiness. On one level, I can make this statement. All phenomena are emptiness, and then everybody will start nodding their heads, right? See, that's because when I say it, we all come to our consensus, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all come to our consensus. In another expression, I can say, all phenomena are empty, but that doesn't mean they are emptiness. Emptiness is exactly like, just as you had said before, it is the mere absence of inherent existence. And emptiness is permanent, but not all phenomena are permanent, right?
All conventionalities are not permanent.
Exactly,
Sure.
exactly. The table, that's impermanent, right? This table is impermanent. It is empty, but it is not emptiness, right? The table is like the basis of its emptiness. So like if we go in a very philosophical way of explanation, then this is how we would differentiate, right?
But now how about the subtlest level of mind?
The subtlest level of mind, still that's not emptiness. If it is emptiness, it is the mere, if it is emptiness, it's got to be permanent. That's rule number one. And if it is impermanent, no matter how subtle it is, no matter how high it is, no matter like how enlightened it is, it can be anything but emptiness, because it is ever changing, because it came out of causes and conditions, right? It goes through this process of being born and then abiding and then ceasing. Anything that has these three status, then they're not.
Then what is union?
What?
What is union?
Union. There are two union, right? The Pangbo Songju, Dobo Songju, right? So one is like the cessation union, and one is something like the realization union. If you're talking about realization union, now that is a path. So naturally, that would be considered impermanent. So when we, again, with this dualism, like categorizing phenomena into impermanent and permanent phenomena, right? Under impermanent phenomena, we have forms, mental consciousnesses, and then is it something like compositional? Yeah, yes, formations. Thank you. So anything that is included within these three categories, they are all considered impermanent, right? So if I ever said clear light is emptiness, then I take it back, right? Then I merely meant to state that clear mind is empty, right? So this is why we would use the word three empties, as opposed to three emptinesses. The three empties. Or is it four? Four empties, thank you. Four empties. The four empties. We would in Tibetan, Tongba Shi. Tongba is empty. In emptiness, we would say Tongba Ni. So Ni, it's almost like it's like a full stop. It's just the mere absence of that. It just stops there. It does not apply to whatever is empty. Yeah. Now this is again in this world of dualism. You have table and you have emptiness of the table. Table is conventional truth. The emptiness of this table, that is this table's ultimate truth, right? So this is how it is usually explained like that. So now this is like trying to be more like philosophical, and in some ways this is very helpful in like sort of drawing clear boundaries, but then sometimes also it's nice to be very like without boundaries, right? And then just say, yes, everything is emptiness. So what? Right? Yeah. So like that. Yeah. Oh, it's 10 past 8. Wow. So what? Oh, so what? Okay. All right. All right. Then maybe 15 more minutes. Okay. If it is 10 past 8, so what? Okay.
So-
I see. Jen, please.
Did you have your question? Or?
Oh, yeah. Please.
Back on the suffering topic, I was curious. I don't mean to point to extremes, but if you read some of the Namtar, the suffering seems to be a form of purification, maybe. And so I wonder, in other teachings, talked about how joyful effort can kind of take you there more quickly. So maybe, is that a transition in the teaching over time, or that's just an extreme that applies then? Or yeah, what do you think about the idea of suffering as a purification or something to be embraced, maybe?
Oh, this is really, I think, really a wonderful way of taking suffering, seeing that as purification practice, This is really wonderful. If one can see suffering as purification, then this is really, thank you. Thank you. And contemplating suffering and generating joyfulness, they do not contradict each other, right? In fact, if I'm not wrong, at a certain stage, seeing suffering, seeing one's suffering, feeling one's present suffering nature, being in this state, experiencing that state gives rise to immeasurable joy at a certain level. Because without suffering, then how can the state of Buddha be accomplished? Without suffering, then how can one practice the Dharma, right? Without suffering. So suffering gives encouragement, joyful encouragement, and gives courage, in practicing the Dharma. It gives something like a reason, a goal. Now there is suffering. In order to alleviate suffering, I will practice, no matter what, right? So that is really to see that as a purification practice, to see that as something like giving life force to our bodhicitta practice. I think to see that as something like an illusion, to see suffering like an illusion, really, then that can be so powerful, right? Yes.
First of all, so if suffering removes negative potentials, then happiness removes positive potentials.
If I may just add a little modification, samsaric happiness.
Okay.
Definitely.
Suffering is samsaric suffering. Then the suffering is samsaric suffering also.
Samsaric suffering gives positive potentials. Samsaric suffering gives positive potential.
Earlier it was said that suffering removes negative potentials, then vice versa, being happy, samsaric suffering removes positive potentials.
I was talking, I was mostly talking about not eating the whole turkey on Thanksgiving, but more, like a form of suffering like Milarepa's suffering when he got the boils on his back. This feels like it's suffering for a meaning, as opposed to suffering just because you ate too much or you
You're right. You're
spent
right.
too much time at the mall.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, definitely. Definitely. So depending on how you look at it, right? On really main point, as you had, I think it brings a certain change, a positive change. This is so important, right? So important. And one, even sometimes if you're not careful, then contemplating suffering can become something like selfish, right? So to contemplate on suffering and then to direct that contemplation towards generating compassion, right? This is, I think, really the main point, right? And so thank you. Thank you.
You got one question on Zoom, and then I'll go to the next person who raises their hand.
Okay. Are there a variety of phenomena in the fully enlightened state? If yes, how are they identified if no this or that are involved?
In the enlightened state, yes, we have many different categories, but these are always explained from the viewpoint of the dualistic mind, not from the viewpoint of the enlightened mind. I don't think so. So I think it's like that.
Rinpoche. Rinpoche, perhaps we can understand the idea of the clear light in terms of mind and emptiness, not mind. Emptiness is an object of the mind of clear light, and emptiness is like a quality of phenomena and mind. And so perhaps that's an easier way of understanding emptiness and clear light. But I'd like to also mention and ask your opinion about that all minds arise based upon the object that it comes in contact with. So sensory minds arise in terms of the object it comes in contact with. So the mind of clear light then arises with the object of emptiness. Is that correct?
What was the last part?
So if we say that minds arise based upon their objects, then the mind of clear light arises in relation to the object emptiness.
This clear light, are you talking about the non-dualistic realization of emptiness, clear light state?
So no, I'm talking about the clear light, the fundamental mind that arises at the point of the full dissolution of the conceptual minds. So when that mind arises, does it realize
this dissolution of the 80 concepts and also the 3 appearances, that clear mind rising can happen in realization of emptiness states and also non-states as well, right? So which are you talking about?
At the time that the mind of clear light arises, when in the dissolution process, the final mind, that innate mind of clear light, would seem, if a mind arises, it must arise in relation to an object. This is what I understand the text to say.
So let
is
us,
that correct? Yes.
let us use one example. So we will go with death clear light for an ordinary person, someone who hasn't done any practice, right?
You mean like just an ordinary person, not a Buddhist,
right?
Somebody sneezing or something where the mind of clear light arises?
No, during the death
process.
Death clear light.
Okay.
Death clear light.
Yeah.
So during death clear light, then what is the object of the death clear light?
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking?
Yes. So so if a mind needs an object to arise, if that's a necessity, then what allows that mind to arise? This mind of clear light during death, let's say. Death, they say emptiness is appearing, but not being realized at the time of death. So although the mind of clear light is arising, it does not necessarily realize the emptiness that it's seeing, but that object is appearing to it, but it's not realizing.
So the mind in ordinary death clear light state, what is its object? I think it is Dongsang, it is that empty. Going through this emptying, and at the clear light state, all empty, that aspect, this is the object of clear light mind.
Thank you.
Not emptiness, but just that, right? Just the 동바, 삼지, 신도 동바, 삼지 동바, 첨부 동바, 삼지 동바, all empty, the all empty aspect. My doubt is something like whether clear light mind, whether it is self-knowing or not. Is it self-knowing or not? This subject was always interesting. But now it's almost 8:30, and I don't think the so what applies here. So, thank you. 다기 진예 사회 개발하는
연단도와 군라 강배 개발하지서 모상 연도세제 조여조이제베에게 조이제메도 다마예레라와엘레 셰예데게 네 사이예제 또 메데 메야와예 도야 나마 따라예제 나 제모 쇼예데야도 나마예사이 데메시에 다예제제 도에베 도에 나마에 샤와에 대제 제야 당하야 나에게 바라도 에메소 예와이지 마제 라와도 세예다마고라나멘달라 냐다야 메아야 잠베바웨 제다 제마다 곤도 삼보데야 데예 대다 근진 제소다로 예와 대다 담제라도 대선 예배 자와 담제 제호와 다예 제베 자와 대근자 삼보 제제라도 덤바지 메베 덤바다 제와 된다라야 제와 대양도와 발르바 신예 담베 젠베죠 펜제 대예 덤바 세베 년도 론제 나바라 메요 덤베 안제 신예 덤 이제 예베 다도 강와 Tene juve tenye seba tuve loza gewa dan. Le dan soya dane zemba la geje zan. Demba chode bawa pame ge ne den yimbo zejen do. Taga yingi bewara junya be namara jube nizenda. Chanjo semjo Rinpoche maje apana jejo yewa nyaba meba ya kone kondo be Pama simje damje deda nejo Nyendo damje tado zongwa Chanjo semba kana sojo Gare rave kurve shinkande pedan dewa male juve. Jere zangwa tenzin jazo ye chabe sede bado. Jewa kundo yanda lama dan deme juje bela lan. Sadan lamje yunde rabzo ne doje chanje goba. Cheje jabo zonga be chezu namda be wa ye ge zema shi wa da ten ge ma le zang wa da da xin ge de zong da de we con ye la de ya wa lo san da ba ba ge ji san ye gu zo ye be je quan ye min ge de be je la che da go wa ma la ru ba Chong ye ge ya wa de ye nyo ro yo do o ya do la ya ma sang ai ge zhu wo yo do jie yang ai ma le ba de sa la